And where I was, there was an opportunity for grants, fundraising in general, just lots of other things. But what I really wanted to do was dive into grant writing with
Yeah.
more individual organizations. And so I did leave my full-time job as a development director at the end of July with the idea that I wanted to start my own consulting and a freelance grant writing business.
Hello, hello. It's Holly Rustick here with Grant Writing and Funding. I'm really excited. I have a guest on the show. She's also in the Academy, and we are talking about all about the last few episodes. All the things we're talking about right now are how to quit your toxic nonprofit job or just how to quit that corporate job and how to become a freelance grant writer. And I have another one from the Academy today, and that's Phaedra Howe. And Phaedra Howe is the founder and grant specialist at Award Ready Consulting. And you just quit your job recently in the last 6 months. So super excited to have you on talking about that. And you're going to hear all these different stories of how people are doing it. Some people are going from full-time to they build out a part-time business. Some people just quit your job like Phaedra today, and then they start their business. So we're going to see all the in-betweens of all of that. So welcome to the podcast, Phaedra.
Thank you, Holly. It's good to be here.
Yeah, so excited, so excited. And you just joined recently too. So I love a lot of you guys are coming on that just joined recently in the Academy, and you've really found a lot of the things useful and how are you applying it as you're quitting your job or once you quit your job. So I love that. And we're definitely going to dive into that. But before we get there, I want to hear more about you because I love hearing everyone's backstories or their origin stories, like how they got into this grant writing. And I know we kind of tapped on it a little bit in the green room. Like you're like, yeah, I've been working inside nonprofits, but like, let me hear it from your lens and tell the people, like, how did you fall into grant writing and how did you make the decision to quit your job and to do this as a full-time freelance business?
Yeah. I mean, going way back. So my Bachelor of Science is in biomedical engineering from college. So
Wow, that's
I
so
have
cool.
a lot of that like research writing, kind of that science background that I did not really apply in any professional setting beyond that. But I did some independent sales and then moved into the role that I had at a nonprofit that people had told me kind of before that time, you should be a grant writer. Nonprofits need that. And so when I joined work at a nonprofit, I had an idea that I wanted to help with grant writing. And so I kind of just learned by doing and had a wonderful position and nonprofit organization to do that at, and just really loved it. So I kept it at it there, and worked up to the development director at a nonprofit organization and worked with writing grants for that organization with other partners, and other nonprofits and organizations in the community. So just really kind of branched out and grew my grant writing experience there, but was more than just a grant writer at a nonprofit, as I'm sure
Right.
lots of, all the listeners know. It was so many hats in that role. And where I was, there was an opportunity for grants, fundraising in general, just lots of other things. But what I really wanted to do was dive into grant writing with
Yeah.
more individual organizations. And so I did leave my full-time job as a development director at the end of July with the idea that I wanted to start my own consulting and a freelance grant writing business. Took some
Mhm.
time off, and then middle of September or so actually started working on that business. Met with a client, secured that client, and was immediately like, it was great. I was so excited. And also
Oh,
like, I need some help being a business owner for myself and being a consultant. I
yeah.
can grant write all day,
Mhm.
and help my clients with what they need, but on the back end for me and running my own business, I would really like some help.
Yeah.
And coming from a place that was relatively solitary, kind of a lone
Mhm.
development person and the only person on that team, I'd already kind of felt a little bit alone in that realm, being your own, like a solopreneur, if you will, and, working remotely. I just kind of wanted a little bit more of that support also of people who were doing exactly what I'm doing too. And that's, what I was looking for when I found the Academy, and then primarily also why I joined.
Love that. That's so cool. That's such a cool story too. Like looking at, and a lot of times I look at that and I say, like, my degree is international political economics. Like it's, it's
Yeah.
like, like When do you use that? Like, it comes in handy, I guess, sometimes when I'm looking at overall, like, the landscape for funding. But honestly, it's like, I was just really interested in that and got a degree. Like, that was fun.
Right.
But, like, really nothing to do with
Yeah.
what I'm doing today. That's so interesting, like, to say, yeah, I have this. And then I really decided that this other work is interesting to me as well. Do you kind of like hunker down into more of the science driven grants at all? Have you done that as much?
Yeah, not necessarily. I think
Mm,
it kind of comes into play where like I can cite, like where I really look at like citing that information. And I think
yeah.
in particular, what I really like about development in general, and kind of especially grant writing, is combining that like head, if you will, a little bit more of that data and kind of the details, data specific details really behind the information for the nonprofit to highlight, kind of the heart of that work. And that's really what I kind of specialize in and say that, my focus is, because combining that head and heart, because nonprofit work is really, tug at your heartstrings and very,
Mhm.
that sort of work. And I like grant writing and development to be able to kind of step back from that a little bit and clear up a little bit more of the data on
Mhm.
that emotional topic, I guess.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, and that's where that like science background comes in, that data driven. Yeah, and that's really cool.
Yeah.
And that's an asset for sure. Like I remember when I was writing my first NOAA grants and I was like, oh, these are very different. Like, my clients, they didn't want the foo-foo names. They didn't want the, you know what I mean? Like they're like, no, it needs to be like this long ass name project because it needed to be very scientific. And I was like, oh, this is different. Okay. Like, so I had to work obviously a lot with many subject matters, experts on that as well, because, talking about scientific instruments and all of that, I'm like, that's not my background. Right. So it's
Right.
really interesting. So yeah, I was like, oh, you'd be a good, like, hey, I could write those NOAA grants, or I could write those,
Yeah.
those more scientific, because it is like a different language almost. Like
Yeah.
it's very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and it's like a clinical story versus, some
Yeah.
other
Yeah.
type of story.
For sure, for sure. And I do like that for grant writing in general, as well, as you mentioned, like it does kind of neutralize it. And I'm like, you can have fundraising letters and all of that to have more of that flowery language, is kind of what I call it, that emotive
Yeah,
flowery language. But in grants, like cut it.
yeah, yeah,
I'm like, the data will show the emotion. I know that sounds kind of cold, but it's not. It's not actually. I find data very emotional, right? Because it,
yeah,
it really
I
tells what you're doing. You're like,
it's powerful for sure, yeah.
yeah, yeah. So, and I love it. Like, I love that you have that lens and say, okay, yeah, that's how I can approach this, is to look at this issue or to look at these gaps in a different way. And that's how you're going to get the points on the grant. So
Mhm.
that's what they're looking for. So,
Yeah,
so good. And then, yeah, so you mentioned then you had this job as a development director and you're doing all the things, like, and I hear that all the time. It's like, I was just talking to somebody yesterday and they're working with an organization, and the organization said, we're going to hire this development director. And she saw the list of all of the expectations and, the job description. And she was explaining it to me. And I said, they're not going to be happy,
yeah,
because what they're going to do is they're going to try to hire someone that has all of that. They're never going to find somebody that has all of that. And even if they had like 95% of it, they're never going to have the time to do all of it. So they're going to have the expectations that I hired you to do this, but then they're never going to have the results of all of that even being done. So they're setting that person up for failure right away.
yeah,
Even if that person, is doing everything they can, it doesn't
yeah.
mean they're not doing a good job. It just means they'll never equal the expectations. Did you ever feel that way as a development director?
I fortunately I can't say that I did outside
Mhm.
of just I think the typical kind of nonprofit experience where it's just never stopping. There's never it's just
Uh,
so much, so much, so much. So
I was like fundraiser to grant to this to that. It's like there's never like a
yes.
closure.
Yes.
So,
Yes. There's always more, there's always more. And there is, it's not I get it, but I fortunately can't say I felt like not met expectations or was like floundering and set up for failure, more just overworked in general.
and is that kind of what made you make the decision? Like, I just need to have more time and not to be my brain in so many places, or like, can you tell us kind of like what made that decision to be like, yeah, I need to go full time and I want to focus on grants?
My brain feeling just constantly kind of scattered and overwhelmed without feeling like I was really diving. I enjoy being able to dive into something and, become like a subject matter expert on at least, a couple things. And I enjoy grant writing out of the development kind of spectrum.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to, like I said, just really be able to dive into that for my own learning and professional growth to become a better expert on those particular
Right.
items within development. And for my brain, just to, I would go to sleep and I would just like, I just can't ever shut my
Yeah.
brain off because there's
Yeah.
so many things. So yeah, it was partly just, yeah, leading up to I need a break. And I think I know what I want going forward and what that to look like to try it out. And then if I don't like it, if it doesn't work, if it's not what I thought it was, well, then, we'll come back. But
Yeah, and I love that thinking of like, okay, I'm doing all these things because I imagine as a development director, you're doing helping with fundraising, probably donors, like all of the things, right?
Mhm.
The corporate solicitations, maybe like all of the maybe Giving Tuesday in there, like all of the right. So
All of them. Yeah. All
all
of
of it,
it.
all of it. So, and then looking at that, and were you kind of like grant writing is what I like the most, or was it like I like it the most and I think there's a good market for it? Or you know what I mean? Like, how did you actually
Well,
select
yeah.
that specifically? Yeah.
Yeah. In particular, I like it the most in
Mhm.
general, but within that, it's also something that's valuable that not everybody likes the most. And I totally
Mhm.
get it. And I
Yeah.
understand, the events and the donors and the community, all that stuff is fun and has its place, obviously, and it's important work. But what
Mhm.
I like is the grant writing and within that, where I think people think that it's really sexy and not to like deter anybody who's joining, but it's as everything, right? It's less sexy than what you might think it is. But I just like that
Yeah.
work. So,
Yeah.
and then within that, it's not for everybody, but it's important work that there is a good market for it to step back from a full-time role and do in a way that I want more
Mhm.
remotely working with other organizations and just being able to set up my own schedule as a freelancer or consultant to be
Yeah.
able to do that. So something that I like doing, but also a valuable skill to then be able to market and work with other organizations because they do need that.
I love that. Yeah, and I love that approach. And I always say, yeah, it's not the sexy thing, but I think we should do a podcast episode with like bring back the grant writing sexy. Because to some people it is sexy because at least it's a word that's thrown out there that people are like, ooh, yeah, you're a grant writer. Like you always get that. So maybe it is sexy, but yeah, like brass tacks, like when you sit down and do it, yeah, it is powerful. It is amazing. But I always say business can be boring and that can be good because you can get systems and like you can just, I'm done, boom, you go and do your thing after, and it's not in your brain all the time. So
Yeah.
love that. Love that. It's so funny. But yeah, and then just looking at it and saying, okay, this is what could bring in income, right? This is what could be
Mhm.
really good. And even I think that's so interesting too to say with fundraising, and since you've experienced all these different, things, there is a lot of that is in person. It is more interactive. There's a lot more meetings, right? That I feel like grant writing, like you mentioned, is like I can kind of do this as in solitude and just it can be minimal contact with clients too. Like, yeah, you still want to have your monthly meetings and stuff like that, but it's not the same, right? Where you're
Yeah.
actually create more space for yourself compared to those fundraising kind of as a consultant, that sort of thing, right?
Yeah,
So
exactly, exactly. And where I was, it was like I see these two strong paths and they're both important. Personally, I just want to be able to focus on
yeah,
this and just for, what I want to build in my life and how I want that to look going forward. So nothing,
love it.
wrong or
Okay.
bad about anything. It's just what I want.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk about the big jump. The big jump. So when you quit your job, did you have your savings? Did you not? Were you like, I'm just gonna make this work? Did you already have a client? Like tell me like what that was about. Or was it just like, I'm just gonna do this and now I have time to like figure it out?
Yeah, we my husband and I had kind of talked about it before, obviously, and we, I was in a position to be able to do that and not have to worry about having anything right off the bat. And, we talked about it, like I can take some time, like partly I'm just feeling really burned out. I don't know how long someone can be burned out, but I feel like it just keeps going. So I just need to take some time. And I was able to do that. So I did not have a plan when I left, other than we had a big trip to Europe planned, went to see the Olympics in Paris. And
Oh, fun. Oh, that's
yeah,
so
so we'd
cool.
already had that plan. So I knew we were
Mhm.
going to do that. And then I said, I'm going to take some time when we come back from that. And then I will look at this like no earlier. It was the end of July, like no earlier than September. I won't even start thinking about it. And then, so it took some time in the middle of September. I was like, yes, I am ready to go. This is what I was hoping to do. So just needed, again, just some time off. And I was, again, able to do that before without having immediate financial stress or anything like that.
Oh, I love that, because you just needed burnout, like
Yeah.
sanctuary to like
Yeah.
repair, right? Like literally, you just were like, I need a month just to, or even more, like a month and a half just to kind of
Yeah.
like get over burnout. And
Yeah.
before I can even
Just
think, wow,
so.
that's what staff positions at nonprofits will do, right? To you. So even if they're help, like you said, it wasn't a toxic situation, it was just too much.
No.
It was just
Yeah.
too much.
Yeah. Yep. Nothing bad to say about it. It was just, yep, too much,
Yeah.
and time for me to do something new.
Yeah. So yeah, and I'm so glad you had that time and space for yourself. I think that's so important, right? So when you had that and you're like, okay, now I'm feeling a little bit more energy. I've had this space and this was my kind of, goal to start the business. Then how was it? Did you just reach out to past contacts? Like, did you go online? Like, how did you get your first client?
Yeah, I had been working with a friend who knew someone locally. And so really I just leaned into my in-person network that I had here locally. And it's currently that's what I'm still working
Yeah.
with right now. And that's successful enough, going forward. So it's been good. And just, yeah, leaning into that. So reaching out, and then anybody who in the past had asked me about that, do you grant write for others? Like, do you do this? And I said, yes. And I reached back out and said, hey, you were asking about this. And now I do
Now
this.
I
So
do.
yeah.
I love that. And I always say like that's the warmest, easiest route to start. Like just
Mhm.
open your phone.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
literally, that's all you need to do. So
Yeah.
I love that. And to look at now, then you said, okay, I got the client, but then it was like, ooh, things came up on the business side. So was that kind of like, how do I onboard them? How much do I charge? Like what questions were you having? And that might have been your easiest client. Were you also thinking like that was easy, but I know I'm gonna have to like get more things in place? Like how did that feel for you?
I think immediately it was like, I've underpriced myself,
Mhm.
and going forward, I just want to be clear on, really just as clear as possible on, yes, onboarding on new clients and what that process will look like as we move forward, and pricing for sure. But then just being clear and confident on again, the business proposal inside of it, because I have the experience as a grant writer. It's, I can write grants all day, but running my own successful business is new. And so that's where I wanted help, and was just immediate. Like I could see myself making lots of mistakes that are neither here nor there, not that a bad thing, but that I could mitigate with some help up front to
Mhm.
maybe not make some of those same mistakes from that business perspective. So that's where the academy came in.
Oh, I love it. I love it. So you joined. So happy to have you in the program. And what did you start with right away? Like what kind of support? What did you dive right into the business acumen? Because we have like grant writing stuff, business
Mhm.
acumen. And what's been the most impactful that you've been using in the last few months since you started, last couple months since you started, and how that has impacted your business?
The business side of it was what I started in with first, and the pricing and setting up your business expectations for proposals also, and like what I should include in that to be clear on what I am offering my clients. And
Mhm.
again, just for myself, coming from this place of, yeah, I could do this, I can do this, I can do this, I can do it all. Look at me juggle all
Yeah.
of these things. Just because I can do it doesn't mean I should or want to, because that's exactly what I left. And so becoming clear on, and just getting a little bit of guidance from that kind of business side of the academy. What do I want that to look like that I'm proposing to my clients? What
Mhm.
am I excited to be doing and can give them that's valuable, of course, but that's not me just throwing up all these balls to do it just because I can and because we have.
Yeah. And I see people, especially like you, that have all of the experience and have done all the things. And I'm in that boat too. I'm like, you want board training, you want strategic planning, like, I can do any of it, right? Like,
Yeah.
but yeah, I got you. But then it's like, oh, we're becoming in that same situation that we left before, right? Like, yeah,
I
like
keep
we actually got out of that.
yeah, I'm inserting myself now as a contracting like development director, like what am I doing?
Yeah.
Why am I even saying that I would be doing that? Yeah.
Yeah.
So
It's so interesting. Yeah. And I think like peeling back those layers a lot of time is really mindset, right? So it's also looking at going like, well, why would you put that out there if that's what you're getting away from? Are you feeling insecure about finances this month? Are you feeling like, or you just don't want to say no? Like, you know what I mean? Like all of the things. I feel like saying no is one of the hardest things, but the most freeing things that grant consultants learn how to do. Because especially as women, we're just not used to saying that word. A lot of times we want to people please, right? Like that's what we call it, people pleasing or whatever. And it's almost like this, like a good trait in a way, but it's like, no, because that was like, you had to take a month and a half off just to
yeah.
decompress. Like that's where yes will get you, right? So learning how to say no, and then knowing in your business that you don't need to treat yourself like your boss used to treat you. I think that's also learning. You know what I mean? It's like, it seems like we all should know that, but we're so ingrained to being an employee that we start treating ourselves like that. It's so interesting.
Totally, totally. And I think that's exactly it, starting with the business stuff, the mindset work of just this is my business and I
Mhm.
am doing this. I am setting everything up. And that was part of it too. If I make mistakes, whatever, it's fine if it's just me to blame, but that I can only be the one in control of that. Like I am the only one. And so getting those systems in place for me is totally possible without
Mhm.
feeling like I'm running around like a chicken with my head cut off because I'm the one who's saying you're running around like a chicken with your head cut off or not.
I love that. So I love that. Yeah, you're like, oh, this is also helping me catch those kind of patterns potentially that I could fall
Yeah.
into just because I know what to do. Like I don't need to do it all. What specific tools have been helpful for you applied from the academy to really, because now you just had a meeting today, like you're getting a client, like you have another client that came in the door, like you've been getting clients in here too, like utilizing these things, but like, has it been a lot of the reviews or coming to the coaching, like, templates, like what has been really useful to get you to where you're feeling more confident and clear in your business today?
Yeah. The business reviews for sure when I kind of submitted some of my package and pricing outlines for that. And again, mostly to be clear for me. And it was just taking the time to get clear for me when I'm approaching a client or what I'm offering, setting those expectations up for myself. And then that can help set those same things up for the clients, and getting reviews and thoughts on those same things for my services. And then the templates also to help. I have them because again, I have a lot of these things in my brain and
Yeah.
it's getting out of my brain and into the system. And that's, one of the main things that I joined the academy for was to just get clear. I have all of this stuff floating around in my brain and I know all of these things that I need to do and that we need to do together with my clients, but getting clear on what that looks like to give to them also. So building the templates to build out my own
I love
documents
that.
and things like that. So yeah.
Yeah. So just the systems and those templates really help just even to do, like you have to think about it, like how would I approach this even of a template, like this is great but now I have to fill it in with my own services and when you submit your services for you. I'm so glad you said that because yeah, like that is a great a lot of people submit their business. We have unlimited business reviews, right? And you can submit your pricing, your packaging, your websites, all the things, but you still have to do the work before you submit it. So
Yeah,
that just doing that will help you get more clear. So the feedback
totally.
is great. It's like a nugget on top, but it's like you got to sit down, do the
Yeah.
work. Yeah.
It's like even once I submit it for review, I'm like, oh, I feel really good about that. So the
Yeah.
review is just, kind of a pat on the back, like, yeah, are you
This is
clear on this?
good.
It looks like you're clear. Good job. But
Yeah.
it's part of that that process is
Mm.
one of the biggest things. And then knowing that somebody will also review and just give their feedback, like if you're clear on this, or
Yeah.
ask some questions too, where maybe it's not clear that like, oh, that's right. Again, we all write these things and, do these things and they seem clear as day to us, but it doesn't come across that way. So
Right. Yeah. I love that. I love that so much because you had mentioned before, like operating in silo, like there's so many benefits to that. Like with your clients, you have more flexibility, more freedom. You don't have to be at every meeting. But like you mentioned, it can be very lonely. And sometimes, like what I know, how I found myself before I had a coach too, and just feedback and community, I would spin out. I would spin out for days because I was like, is this the right price? Like when people ask for a proposal, right? And I couldn't
Mhm.
get back to them within 24 hours. Like, you know what I mean? Like I needed to like, and plus I was always doing a new service because what they asked for it, right? Like all of the things. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's like, it's so helpful. I feel like as soon as I had community feedback, a coach, like my business like got clear, I felt confident, and then I was able to make more money and do more, have a higher ROI for my clients because I was just like
Mhm.
focused. So I
Yeah.
love that's
Yeah.
helping you in the systems and processes that we have. So so good. Also, anyone on the fence, they have just been burned out like you were, development director potentially, right, in a nonprofit. And they're like, I don't have any clients yet, but I want to quit this job and kind of do the path that you do. Would you give them any recommendations or feedback?
Yeah, I would, I had the fortunate situation to be able to change. And, some people in my life are like, what did you do? And then some were really supportive. And, it's like, I'm
Yeah.
not working. I think that was kind of the biggest shock for people. Like, that's not my plan. And we're going to be working for a very long time. And I like to work. So that's not, that's not
Yeah.
what this is. But I think leaning into your skills that you have is valuable, and reaching out to people with that can feel maybe scary, but just do it. I don't know.
Just do it. Do it. Yeah. You almost got to get so uncomfortable at your job sometimes to, you know what I mean? To like remember, like, I don't want to be there again. Like, this is so uncomfortable that I have to, I have to change,
Yeah.
unfortunately. But I know when I was working too at a 9 to 5, and I just felt so uncomfortable. Like, you know what I mean? Just like so burned out and just to the point where I was like, I need to do something. I have to change. If I don't, then I just can't keep going. Right. I was so burned out like you.
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and yeah, it's scary, right? It's scary, but leaning into skills or developing a skill that is, even if it ain't sexy, that will be
Mhm.
around and that people need, right? Like grant writing.
Mhm.
Such a good
Yeah.
skill. So I love that so much. Yeah. So, so good. I'm so glad you came on today to talk about all of your journey with us and your journey before us and then meeting us and all the things. So you're writing grants for nonprofits out there listening. Where can they find you?
So it's Award Ready Consulting, and awardready.com is my website, or you can reach me at Phaedra@awardready.com.
Love it. Love it. We'll have all of the links in the show notes. But yeah, if you guys are listening, that's where you can find Phaedra. And you're based in Colorado, but you take clients everywhere. Yeah, online. So, but
Yeah.
I know you have some clients in your area too. If that's important for you all, then you guys can definitely check her out in Colorado. So I love that so much. Thank you so much, Phaedra, for joining the Academy and coming on today's podcast so we can talk about your experience. Love
Of
it.
course. Thank you, Holly.
You're welcome. And I'll see you back inside the Academy.